What's up everyone? As all of you guys are probably, well, I mean most of you guys, I don't want to say all, right? Because there's going to be people down in the comments saying this is the easiest Spiral Abyss I've ever done in my whole life. Did it with my eyes closed, hands tied behind my back, playing with my feet. You guys know the spiel, right? There's those people who are trying to flex on everybody, trying to underplay the people's accomplishments by chalking it up as it's easy. But most people have been saying that this current iteration of the Spiral Abyss has just been, wild, very difficult. The enemies deal a lot of damage. There's a lot of CC. You basically have very small windows to capitalize on enemy weaknesses, and most above all, crazy mechanics, gimmicks that you need to somehow overcome, either by having OP characters that are designed to counter these mechanics or just have an insanely whaled out account. However, what are the players in CN doing, right? This data you're about to see, well, it's already on screen, is basically gathered by some of the top meta players in CN. Yes, there are some whales in here, but there are also free-to-play players. There are also some light spenders, so you get the whole range of people. It's roughly around, I'd say, like 100,000 data points, but these are 100,000 of the most consistent meta players the game has to offer. So if you guys are struggling, in this video I'm going to be showcasing you guys all the tier lists that they have ranked for these characters based on their usage to ownership rates, as well as teams that they use for first half and second half, and of course the love and behold usage rate adjustment from the previous iteration of Abyss, because it's best to see characters through multiple iterations of the Abyss as opposed to just one singular Abyss, right? There are certain characters that may exist as anomalies in one iteration, whereas they don't perform as well in others. We are looking for those characters that are always good, always used. So without further ado, let's just look at the data, right? Like 97.8%, like this is just unheard of. I think Nahida has officially overtaken Venti's record in terms of usage rate, at least when it comes to this set of data and players. I believe Venti at his highest point was 95%, give or take, somewhere around there. Nahida officially overtakes him as currently the most utilized single unit in one iteration of Spiral Abyss. Out of 100,000 people, 97.8% has used her in this Abyss clear. Just comes to show how instrumental she is currently in the meta, and also potentially down the line how good of an anchor she has been for a lot of players, especially top meta players. Kazuha making a comeback. No surprise here with the amount of elemental teams that are currently kind of swirling around. Insane usage rate. Pretty much everybody who can use him is using him to clear. Now the rest here probably doesn't come too much of a surprise, but not having Raiden Shogun here in S+ is also indicative of just how much output this iteration of the Spiral Abyss is currently demanding. Xiangling making her way really up to the S tier, so close to that S+ tier, mainly because of her gimmick, and of course Hu Tao jumping up from the A tier, as well as Ayaka also along with Shenhe moving up to the S tier. Like these characters are absolutely needed right now. If you have a well-built Ayaka, well-built Hu Tao, right, insanely cracked out Xiangling, you're just gonna have a slightly easier time compared to other people. Nilou has taken a backseat in this particular scenario, as her niche really doesn't fit extremely well. I mean, you can definitely still use her, don't get me wrong. All these characters, even in the B tier, can still be used to clear the Abyss. It's just that when it comes to meta and preference, efficiency basically, these characters here at the top are just gonna do better overall for your account. And let's be honest here, Alhaitham, Zhongli, Kazuha, Raiden, Kokomi, Baizhu, Yelan, Nahida, these are characters that are consistently at the top of their game. If you have most of these characters, like even if you have only half of the S+ and S tier character, you probably aren't going to feel as bad as, let's say, you have mostly invested in the B tier and A tier characters. A lot of these B tier characters usually hover around B tier. Very rarely do they actually even make it out into the A tier. It's really the A and S tier, and then the S and S+ tier characters that are constantly interchanging between multiple iterations of the Abyss. Oftentimes you'll just see that during one Abyss it favors a certain type of playstyle or damage or gimmick, then an A tier character might jump to S tier, right? Or maybe during another Abyss suddenly it favors another playstyle, then an S tier character may jump to S+ tier. They're all really good characters, including the A tier characters. So I honestly would just say all of these characters are incredibly good, and these characters are good but require a little more investment. All right, Anyways, let's move into the C tier. Nothing too much to look at here. I'll be honest, all right, these characters probably do need a little bit of help here and there. Not only do they require immense investment, but they also require fully invested supports to just kind of carry them through the content. All right, a lot of people would say, Walrus, how the hell is Eula so low? Like, she should be a S tier minimum, right? She can one-shot everything in the game. Oh yeah, maybe if you have a C6 or 5 Eula, but if we're looking at just base Eula, comparative to even, let's say, like some of the new characters, base Alhaitham is far superior. Base Ayaka, more versatile, right? So a lot of these characters are down here mainly because that they're not efficient. The amount put into these characters doesn't yield as much coming out, and you know how meta players like to be most effective, right? Hence why a lot of these characters, just in layman's term, aren't effective. Now, let's just move on to the next one. I don't want people to linger too long on this page because a lot of their waifus are probably sitting down here. Anyways, now we look at the specific data. So right now, as you guys can see here, I'll again explain what all this means. The character is the column. The number of times they appeared is right here down this column. The number of people who owns them down this column, and the ownership rate, the usage rate, right? So as you guys can see, that's how it's calculated. So just take a quick glance. We already went over this. These characters are insane. Moving on. This is actually very interesting. This is the change in usage rate since the last patch. Now I'm going to show you guys the negative side. So the characters that dropped off the most. Kazuha making a huge comeback from the previous Abyss is mainly because of his elemental team synergies. This guy is just out of this world when it comes to certain specific usages, and right now any elemental team can benefit him except for Mono Geo, Dendro teams, and Mono Anemo. Well, like honestly, Mono Anemo is kind of weird to begin with, but right now Ayaka teams are super strong, right? Xiangling teams are super strong, so having Kazuha in there is going to amplify their damage not only through his talent but also through Viridescent Shred. So you are absolutely going to need this buff and debuffing technically to chew through some of the tougher enemies. Now it's also not really surprising that Ayaka and Shinhe are both making a comeback. CN really loves this combination duo. There's a lot of Giga Whales who have C12, right? The goddess duo, and of course free-to-plays also can lean into Ayaka as a crush. She has insane multipliers, and combined with freeze, it's just a lot easier to deal with the enemies that are being delivered to us in this current Abyss. Hu Tao climbing back up, Xiangling getting a huge boost along with Bennett from previous Abyss is indicative of the meta that was Nilou and Super Bloom, right? Usually when Nilou comes up, a lot of these characters flushes back down, but once Nilou gets removed, these characters instantly rises back up. Nowadays it's always just Nilou or elemental teams, right? It's either Super Bloom or elemental teams. So right now elemental teams are extremely good. We're going to be looking at a couple teams a little later. Moving on. See, this is what I've been saying. When Super Bloom falls, Elemental rises. And as you guys see, when Nilou here has negative 49.3% usage, she was 70.7, I believe, just cressing into the S plus or at the highest end of S tier by the CN metric. Now she's fallen back down to A tier, which is still extremely respectable. Think about it. Imagine dropping 49.3% and still being above the vast majority of DPS units in the game. Absolutely wild. Alhaitham took a pretty hefty hit as well at 18.9. Raiden Shogun, Yelan dropped by 15.1%. However, she still was able to maintain that S plus percentage. At this point, what even is this character? I don't even want to think about it. Baizhu, as anticipated, post launch, he has dropped off a little bit. I do anticipate in the future he's going to hover around 40-50%, and that's a very comfortable spot for a character like him. And maybe in future metas he might even fall down to A, maybe B tier, but I think A is where he's going to be spending a lot of his time in future metas, not the current ones. All right, so take a glance. This is the biggest shift in usage rate. Yaya went from 10.3 down to 5.6. Heartbreak. Now I think this is what a lot of people are curious about. What the hell are they using for teams, right? What are they doing with these team compositions? How are they clearing the Abyss? Now, as you guys can see, I only have 10 here selected, but the 10 different team usages should be able to show you guys what is preferred, and maybe some of you guys can take this away and construct your own, right? So first one, Absolute Zero, is no wonder that CN is relying on this team. Now, yes, this data might be skewed somewhat by Giga Whales with C12 and just crushing through the Abyss. However, at the same time, I want to urge you guys to also understand the strength of this team. Having all your damage basically channeled into Ayaka, this team kind of makes her into a hyper carry in a sort, and it's also evident in that 100% usage in the first half to deal with some of the most annoying enemies the game currently has with her huge multipliers. Very impressive team. If you guys have it, I urge you all to use it. Now in this case, a lot of people say, oh, what if I drop Kazuha for something like Sukkos? Well, Kazuha also has elemental damage buffing depending on his elemental mastery, so don't forget about that. Every bit of scaling in this iteration of the Abyss count, especially if you're playing C0 characters like C0 free-to-play weapon Ayaka, you're gonna need Kazuha, right? So he is as replaceable, as well built as the rest of your units are. If let's say your Ayaka is C3 or C2, sure, right, you probably don't need that extra bit of damage. However, if you're already running bare bone setup for the other characters, then yes, maybe a Kazuha is going to be necessary. Now, wow, I totally didn't expect this team to be in here. I never see Tartaglia. That's a joke, of course. Tartaglia International is one of the most relied upon team comps that the CN has to offer. 50-50, as you guys can see, true to its name, the most versatile team comp. Can go first half, can go second half. If you have this team, urge you all to use it. Unfortunately, you can't be using it at the same time with your Ayaka team because they both share. Kazuha, what a dilemma. Nowadays, second half literally is just kindergarten team. Nahida, Xingqiu, Bennett, and Zhang Ling. This team is pretty self-evident. It does a bit of everything. The damage is actually surprisingly evenly spread out through this team, and for that reason, the second half is where it's gonna be. With a ton of consistent uptime for elemental damage sources, you're gonna be shredding away a lot of the shields that you're gonna be dealing with in the second half of this Abyss. This team is probably the best when it comes to application for all three of these elements, right? The best Dendro applicator, the best Hydro applicator, the best Pyro applicator, and of course Bennett, the cheese god, running Thunder Fury set and then just standing on his ult and then pressing E. This team is very interesting to look at, but is even more interesting to play. Urge you all to give it a shot. I'm not going to go through every single team, but you guys can pause the video, take a look at what is first half, what is second half. As you guys can see, Hu Tao in the second half here, instead of double Hydro, they're flexing with Nahida, which if you're running this team in the second half, you can always be running this Tartaglia variation in the first half or this Ayaka team in the first half, right? They don't conflict with each other. That's why Hu Tao teams oftentimes feels very good to have, is because that is a little more flexible and it offers up the free slots of these other important units to go in the other half. So going down here, this is going to be the last team I go over. An Ayaka team again, but to substitute it with some of the other units, if you don't have, let's say, Kokomi or Shenhe, then you could run Mona and Diona, right? It's never just set in stone, and even in CN, right, people are so desperate to run Ayaka that they're going to be running this variation, and you're going to know that this is probably not a C6 R5 Ayaka, because if you're going to C6 R5 Ayaka, there's no way you're not C6 R5 in Shenhe, especially in the CN meta. This is a much more free-to-play friendly team for those who didn't hyper invest in these other 5 stars. But that concludes the video. Thank you guys so much for watching. What do you guys think of this iteration of the Abyss, and what do you think when it comes to the methods that CN has used to combat the difficulty spike? I look forward to reading your comments down in the comments, and until next time, urge you to stay safe. Peace. Bye bye.